everyone. We have Kari The Mortician, the infamous YouTube sensation. You can find her on YouTube at Kari The Mortician. You've probably seen all of her amazing videos that she puts out. She's currently putting out these really nice 2-minute clips. I don't know, Kari, if you're going to keep going down that trend, but I think it's such a nice thing for people outside the industry and inside the industry. It's you got some helpful stuff, and you really do like a jack of all trades. So we'd love to hear how you got started and kind of what your story is and how you got to where you are today.
Oh my. So, I started in the business when I was 16 and needed a job in the funeral, just a job. And my mom was an aftercare coordinator.
Okay.
And she's like, why don't you just work at the funeral home? So I did the 4 to 9 shift during the weeks, some evenings. And then that was back when we had pagers and we needed to let the small town funeral directors go have a life for a little bit. So we did the 9 to 3 and then a 3 to 9 shift. Saturdays and Sundays at the funeral home because you got to let people go and somebody has to cover the phones. So I would work Saturday and Sunday, a 6 hour each day. And that's just what I did all through high school, summers in college, and just kind of cultivated, I think, a love and a comfort for the business and curiosity. And I don't think I ever recognized it. It was my mom who said, why don't you try being a funeral director, junior year of college when I was studying psychology at a small liberal arts college and spending too much money doing that. And I didn't know which path I wanted to go, and everything I wanted to do was like 8 more years of college, which seemed like the most horrible thing ever. And tried it, and about 2 weeks into my apprenticeship, I was hooked. So then I went to mortuary school after I got my psych degree and went to Cincinnati. And
Nice.
the rest is history. I've been licensed 20 years now. So
That's
a
fantastic.
lifetime, it feels like.
I think that psychology background is super, super helpful when you're aiding the families there, I would imagine.
You like to think it is. Some of it you can't train. Some of the way of thinking about and talking to people, you just can't train. I think some of it's just ingrained and not ingrained. Even if you had a doctorate in psychology, you may still not be really even great at talking with families. But you can analyze them all to death, but you may not be able to, do it. So
It's such a special thing, and I think honestly it comes across in your videos. You have such a kind, caring voice, honestly, and that's sometimes what people really need to hear, is just have someone to lean on. I think it's so important. And you still have people that are a little too harsh and brash, and they don't absorb themselves like, hey, this is a big deal for someone. And I think every time either you're making arrangements or taking on a funeral, or even if you're in the prep room, honestly, you have to be like, all right, this is something very special, very important to someone. And if you look at it from that mindset, I think it just makes a world of difference, and it kind of helps you have a better outlook on everything, in my opinion.
oh, for sure. And I think that we do lose sight of the actual actions that we're doing sometimes throughout what we're doing, especially in a high volume funeral home. The
Yep.
one I'm primarily at does about 900 to 1,000 calls a year.
Oh my
You get to
gosh.
almost factory mode where
Yeah.
you're just hammering through, and sometimes you get lost in the actions and not in the loss and the emotions and everything behind what you're doing. And you have to almost step yourself back and go, whoa, 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 like I've got to remember this is someone's loved one. It's not just another body I have to dress, or
Yep.
this is this family, I have to stop and do this. I think when you're in a smaller town, when you're doing 150 a year, it's easier to focus on that. But it is, you do get lost in it sometime. And our heads are not always clear. Everything in our lives is not sunshine and roses. And so
Right.
if we're having a bad day, it's hard to give what's left of ourselves to families. But
Sure.
yeah, we
I
do our
think I
best,
think
I
it
guess.
is, especially, I mean, I'm from like a smaller family funeral home, so we're around like 250 or 300, so kind of
Okay.
like that in between. But I think when you're in a large facility like that, it's just such a grind, and you're trying to get through, trying to get the next thing done. It's just chaos. It's
Right.
got to be so hard to kind of focus up, I would imagine.
Well, and it's hard because you can't take a lot of time with any one family like you would
Yep.
want to do in smaller towns. I will do all sorts of crazy things and go get little something for the family, or have
Hmm.
extra little something at visitation, but I may only meet with a family and never see them again. I may
Right.
never see them for visitation, for funeral, for first view, for anything.
Hmm.
And so you don't get that really close connection with families by going on the removal, doing the prep,
Yep.
doing the arrangement, following them through. And I do miss that more, because you don't out of necessity get that with a
Right.
larger funeral home, because it's so compartmentalized, because it has to be.
Yeah. And there's no other way to do it. You couldn't possibly imagine someone making arrangements with 15 families and like trying to go on the removals and be with
No,
them on the funerals. It just, so when you're, so you
no.
do a lot of trade work, I know, and you're primarily kind of at one funeral home, is that correct?
Primarily, and I work at the one primarily doing arrangements and working with the
Right.
families, and I feel like I balance a lot of families well for the most part, so I can handle a large volume that way,
Got it.
where some directors get frazzled if they're meeting with two families a day, where
Right.
I'll handle three or four if I need to or something, and other people are more comfortable in other areas. So I think you have
Sure.
to find your best skill set when you're in that large of a funeral home,
Hmm.
and you just have to go with it. It doesn't matter what you might like to do always, but you find your best skill set and kind of go with it. So
Yeah, kind of double down
I
on
think,
like what area you're most proficient at, I would say.
right,
Do you have any
right.
tips for our funeral directors? So let's say you are meeting with 3 or 4 families a day. How do you do that? How do you keep people straight? How do you keep everything organized in your own mind from a paperwork standpoint? What is the best way to go about that if you have a day like that where you're meeting with 4 families or something?
Well, and I think it's so crucial that you find what works best for you, because you could go to work for a funeral home and they try and tell you everything you need to do, but it may not be what works best. It's like
Hmm.
every kid learning in middle school. Every kid doesn't learn the same way. And so when you force upon someone your way of doing something, it may not lead to the best results from
Yeah.
them. So I am like right now we use Kraken,
Hmm.
and I like Kraken because of the checklists and because of the note section. And I think it's a really good, efficient system that you can gear towards all the directors in one program.
Right.
But I am a checklist person. I don't like paperwork on my desk. So
Yeah.
I like to go through that paperwork, and I kind of have my own system of how to do it, where other directors have other ways of doing it. But I don't like to keep files. I don't like paperwork. What I know, and I think it's doing the freelance where I would go in and cover funeral homes and then have to leave after 2 3 days. What's in my head cannot just go with me. It has to be
Right.
there, and it has to be there for the director. So I'm a note taker, I'm a task list doer,
Hmm.
and I work efficiently in that way. And when I'm making arrangements, I'm always almost doing two or three things, where I'm, when I go in to make phone calls, I'm starting to type up the obituary.
Hmm.
Not everybody works multitasking, but I almost work better if I have two or three balls in the air as
Hmm.
opposed to one,
Well,
where
you
I
are a
get
funeral
easily
director, so
distracted.
I think it's implied you need to.
You have to. When I think my ADD brain, like if I'm only dealing with one ball, I'm thinking of my grocery list, or I'm
Yeah.
thinking of what I have to do later. Where if I have two balls, I'm super work focused. And so I almost have to have a few more things going at one
Sure.
time to work the best. But I think knowing how each director in your funeral home functions the best is so critical, and having
Sure.
communication with everybody in a central system, and a calendar that works well. Those things are so critical to funeral homes, big or small.
Yeah. And I think the way you do it and just being meticulous about putting in your notes and things is so important because you're not handling taking out that funeral or whatever else. And
Right,
it's so different when you come from if you're coming from a smaller place because you're used to being like everything's kind of in your brain, but you can't do
right.
that if you're handling excessive amount of calls like a call a day or whatever else. You can't do that.
No, because 3 days later, when you're 10, 12 families in, you cannot remember what happened 4 days ago,
Right.
especially if you meet with four older ladies and you've met with four widowers or something like that.
And they all
They
look the same.
all, and they're all named Betty, they're all named Betty. They all start getting intermixed. And we
Sure.
serve a lot of Dutch families at the one funeral. So it's like Vanda this and Vanda
Yeah.
this and Vanda, like, and they're all, one week we've had it multiple times where we have two people with the exact same name,
Oh my
like
gosh.
Betty Vanderveen, or whatever. And it's like, okay, we got to get those initials in there and we got to make sure, or, yeah, it's crazy when you have that big, because you do get these weird, ironic coincidences of names going on, and you have to really double check spellings and
Right.
things. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. And even coming from our size funeral home, I think there's going to be a trend, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, towards more of like the trade work where people are going to be coming in to even like not the largest funeral homes, because I don't know if there's less people or less quality funeral directors or what exactly it is. Or maybe from a business point of view, if you own a funeral home, it maybe doesn't make sense to have 8 funeral directors on staff if you have 2 calls coming in one week and then 28 the next week. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm
Right.
saying. I think there possibly
Exactly.
could be a trend towards that. What are your thoughts on that maybe for the future?
Well, one thing I see is could be a potential, and I think we saw this during COVID,
Uh-huh.
where we were not making arrangements in person as much. We
Right.
were having to be forced to do them remotely. Is that you could hire me as an on-call person
Yeah.
for your funeral home, and when you have someone that you're working with remotely, and I don't know how often you see it there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's just because I see it from a high volume funeral home,
Mm-hmm.
that we get the grandkids are in Colorado and they're not coming to town to take care of grandma, so
Yeah.
you're doing everything remotely. And at least once a week we're having this. That's 52 calls a year at
Wow.
least that are fully remote, if not more, especially if you
Sure.
run these online direct cremation through
Yep.
your funeral home as well. Remote does not mean less work.
No.
You've got to make,
Probably
you
more.
got to do email, you got to do paperwork, you're chasing, you're making sure things come through. And you can hire somebody that's anywhere to handle that, as long as, like Michigan, we don't have to be a licensed director to do contracts
Oh,
or
okay.
anything.
Okay.
So you can hire somebody to just be an arranger to make arrangements, and
Really?
it's all
Oh.
legal. And so that is a component I see that could happen, where one person could farm themselves out or be available to work for multiple different funeral homes doing their remote services.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great business model
No
that
doubt.
could be potential. It just depends on the state and the legality and things
Yeah.
like that. I've seen on Indeed, because I always keep an eye on Indeed, and like, schools that are hiring different things, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of what's out there. And there's quite a few remote positions for arrangers in like California and stuff, but they want you to be in. I'm like, how are you remote, but you want the person to also be there? So
Yeah.
you're working from home, but you're in the town that the facility is, which doesn't make sense. Like, if
Right.
you're going to be remote, you can be anywhere.
Sure.
So I see that as being something that could be done, because I sometimes will spend triple the time on a remote call for a direct cremation than I do on a full service call
Right.
that I'm dealing with in person. So I could see that as being something that would be beneficial to some funeral homes.
I definitely think so. And there could be, I mean, potentially down the road, there could be a company one day that would do that, where they have a team of, hey, these are our funeral directors, and you could hire that company to kind of use them at your own discretion, sort of deal. That's really interesting concept. And I think it's a possibility for sure.
Patent pending for Kari
Yeah.
Northey.
We'll have to go to business together. No, I love it. That's
I know,
really
seriously.
that's a really interesting idea. What would you say
Yeah.
your favorite part of funeral services overall? I know you do mostly arranging now, but I'm assuming back before you did that, you would maybe do, because a lot of your videos are prep work too. So, what would say
Yeah.
your favorite part is overall, typically?
I like that there's variety. I mean, you
Yeah.
do. Some days you come in and I am stoked to meet with families. I am super excited to get immersed in their stories and
Yeah.
what they're doing. And there's days I come in and I don't want to speak to anybody. I want to look like I do. Like right now, I don't know if you're doing video or if we're strict podcasts, but like, I got up this morning, I work out, I throw on a stocking cap when I get up in the morning. I have shorter, crazy hair. I always work out with stocking cap, and I've just been working in the office. And here I am doing a podcast. So there's days I can
You look good. You
look
look
like
good.
this, throw on sweatpants, and I can go in and I can prep, and it
Right.
doesn't matter because nobody's gonna see me.
Yeah.
I can wear whatever crazy ensemble I want and do whatever I want. Here I am.
Those are
And
some of the best
so,
days.
and so it really just, I think there's that ebb and flow of when you're having a bad day, you can be like, can I work in prep today, and just go work in prep and
Right.
just methodically go through your stuff, and it's silent and you don't have to deal with any
Mm-hmm.
living person. So I think I like that, but I also do like that continuity of following people through everything,
Sure.
being their person through the whole process, like getting
Yeah.
invited to family reunions that they have down the road because you were their person for so much, and
Sure.
getting thank you cards, and I think feeling like you did your job really well,
Yeah.
that they recognize how important of a role you played with them. There's so much negativity when it comes to being funeral directors in the
Yeah.
media and with people, and so much distress. And you
Yeah.
can tell families when they come in and they sit down, and
They have
they're
that
like
edge.
waiting for you to, they're just waiting for you to like try and oversell them, try and undercut them,
Mm-hmm.
try and be that bad person they believe that you're going to be. And so when you kind of bring them into the good side of funeral directing, it's like a good win
Yeah.
for you to be able to do that. So
I love that. And I think
I
that's
ramble in my I ramble in my answers
no,
too.
I like it.
Sorry.
And I think that's really what you do with your channel. Like you try to show people like, hey, this is not the way people perceive it is not exactly what it is. And I think I'm pretty sure that's one of your goals is to kind of bring people aware to, hey, we are doing like some very significant, very special work for families, and people that don't see that can kind of open up their eyes and be like, oh wow, this is actually like a meaningful thing that funeral directors are doing every single day. It's exhausting too, so it's like give us some
It
slack.
is exhausting. It's you can only fight so much of a battle because media is a larger presence than I will ever be in my thing. But if I can flip a few people along the way and educate, I get so many emails about, I've been watching you for 2 or 3 years, and my mom died, and I went in and I knew exactly what questions to ask.
Yep.
I knew what I wanted. We had the conversations because my mom watched your channel or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And I've had funeral directors say to me, why are you telling all our secrets? I'm like, what secrets am I telling? There's
Right.
no, if you have a secret, you're doing something wrong. If you are
Yes.
doing something you don't want the public to know, you are doing something wrong. If somebody can not come in and watch what you're doing, and you feel like it needs to be hidden, you are doing something wrong. And that's why
I love that.
I do a series. It's called Naughty Funeral Homes. And it came from a random thing I said once during a live. And I got laughing so hard when I said, that's naughty. And so people started like commenting it back to me, like, that's naughty. And so I got a t shirt that said that's naughty. And I do
Of
a
course.
series on naughty funeral homes and like telling these stories because there are naughty funeral homes and there are people who do bad illegal things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the norm though. When there's
Right.
19,000 funeral homes in America, and there's not, you got a handful of naughty ones. It's not like it's the norm, but
Right.
I think it's still good to say we recognize there's bad people. We're not disillusioned to that.
Sure.
So here we are, here we're talking about it. Let's talk. And there's that video on YouTube that people keep sharing, and I'm like, don't share it. Sharing brings it up in algorithms. It's like the 20 things funeral homes don't want you to know, or the 10 things, or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's the dumbest video because, and don't go Google it, anybody, please. Um,
as we
but
have
so I
people
like
googling.
I redid and did the 20 things or the 10 things, I can't remember how many, that funeral directors want you to know. And it was basically everything they said,
Ooh.
but I talked about all of them. And like, funeral directors don't want you to know that embalming is not really something you have to do. Well, no, you don't have to. It is not a law in any state that you have to embalm
Right.
unless you're holding that body extended time or you're having a public viewing and the funeral home requires it. Not a law, but
Right.
it might be a requirement. So it's like yes, but there's caveats to things and there's more explanation than just a yes or no. But no, you don't have to. It's not
Right.
a law. I will say it. I am a
Yeah.
funeral director, and it's okay for you to know this. It's not a
Of course.
secret we want to keep. But I think it makes consumers feel empowered, which is great.
Right. I think that's part of it. And the crazy thing is when people go off on that tangent, they don't even realize the condition or the state that their loved one could be in. And
Right,
if they were able to see the transformation that is made oftentimes, that's part of the whole problem, is because people see it as
right.
like, oh, they're just trying to, take advantage of me going through a loss. Absolutely not. You should see the work that everyone puts in just to give you like that one last good memory. Like, we're trying so
Yes.
hard, and then some people are just like, nope, like, you're trying to take advantage. No, we are not.
I think it's like any of the conversations that we have encountered in the last 2, 3 years, especially
Hmm.
within our society. It does not matter what fact, what study, what anything you present to some people, they will fight to the death to
Yep.
the statement that they want to believe in.
Hmm.
I have people, one of my biggest things that people get crazy about is I cannot believe you let blood, body fluids, or embalming fluid from embalming go down the drain. Like that is one that people just cannot get. Like you are
Right.
poisoning. My response is always when you throw up, when your finger is bleeding, when you're taking medications and you're defecating, you're
Yeah.
urinating, where is it going? It's
Right.
going in the same source. And so I went to a water treatment facility and I'm like, okay, we're going to do a video here. And we were going to follow things through the whole process.
Sure.
It smelled super great there, let me tell you. But the fact that in parts per trillion, and I looked at all the reports with the man that runs the place, you could not find formaldehyde in the water at parts per trillion. But what you
Right.
could find was hormones,
Hmm.
medication, household cleaning chemicals,
Yep.
things that people are dumping down their drains at home. And I present this and I tell people, and they're still like, nope, you're poisoning us. I'm like, well, you obviously don't want to hear facts and you don't want to look at reality.
They're
It is.
stuck.
They just want to argue against whatever they
Yep.
believe.
Whatever the
And
belief
that's,
is.
to each his own. But, these people are probably poisoning our society more than any of us are doing what we're doing embalming. So I have no problem with
Right.
what I'm doing, putting bodies in the ground and embalming and it going down the drain. And
Absolutely.
but yeah, that was kind of a fun thing though. It was kind of proving to myself that
Right.
what we're doing is okay.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to or talked to Ben from Worsham? He
Oh,
does.
Ben Schmidt, I love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
embalming
awesome.
chemicals in the
Yeah,
wild.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was just gonna say. He does the
Yep.
chemicals in the wild, and it's like, hey, these
Yeah.
are everyday chemicals that people are using left
Yep.
and right all over the place. So it's just
That
that
you're
hang up,
consuming in food.
right?
It's
Yeah.
the
Let
food that
alone,
you're eating that
yeah,
has them in
going
it.
down that's getting treated in the the water plants and
Yep.
everything. I wanted to talk about kind of your YouTube page for a little bit. How did it get
Yeah.
started? How did you get there? What made you even get into it in the first place? And now you have so many people watching you. It's such a cool thing. How'd you do it?
Yeah. So about 5 years ago, because I think we're at 5 years, it was in May. I was about 5 years that I've been posting. And I had left one funeral home and I was kind of in between kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I didn't realize it. I was in a rut. I was kind of burned out from the business because I had been working for not the greatest people.
Okay.
The funeral part was great, but the people are not great.
Yep.
That's what I always say about burnout.
It's
It's not
huge.
usually the work, it's the employees. And so I was just kind of doodling around at home, just like trying to figure out what I was doing. And my husband at the time had just worked helping to build a pond because he did landscaping, pond building, and stuff
Uh huh.
for one of the Pauls, the whatever the crazy Paul brothers from YouTube.
Okay.
And
Oh yeah,
he's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Well, why don't you do a YouTube something?" And I'm like, that sounds weird. And he's like, well, why don't you go on Facebook? Just ask, like, what do people want to know about being a funeral director or funerals? And so on my personal Facebook, I just asked the question. I got like 15 questions from family and friends, and I did
Mm-hmm.
a Facebook Live for each of them. And I remember going live that first time, and you watch the number of how many people are watching you. And it was like, oh my God, I can't stop this in the middle. Like, this is live and this is happening. It was terrifying. So about 12 in, I was more comfortable. But then I started having people saying, hey, I want to share this with my mom. Hey, I want to share this with so and so. And I
Sure.
was like, well, I don't want to, just have my Facebook public. So I figured out how to put them on YouTube and just like posted them. Well, then I started getting comments, and I got like 100 subscribers, and I was like,
Cool.
100 subscribers? Like, this is crazy.
I'm famous.
And then I remember hitting 1,000, and it was like, I took pictures and I'm drinking champagne. Like, I was so like, that was crazy. So there was never any intention of being a YouTuber.
Right.
And I think until I hit 100,000, I still felt like a dork for saying I'm a YouTuber. But at about 50,000, I was like, well, I'm kind of legit at this point,
No doubt.
at least to a certain degree. And now being at 100, and I think I'm at 108,000, I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I guess I am pretty legit, but I still feel like nobody knows that I'm there. So it's just
No.
one of those, hard to have the realization of the scope of what that is.
Sure.
Truly. And so it just grows and it grows and it grows. And it is really consumers that are watching for the
Yeah.
most part. My algorithm is about 50-50 with men to women.
Okay.
50 to 80 age range is really my prime age
Really?
range.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
the crazy thing about my channel, so on YouTube, 3 to 4 minutes is the average watch time.
Okay.
On my channel, it's about 6 to 7 minutes.
That's
And when you
unbelievable.
factor in that half of my videos are only 2 minutes long,
Right.
that means people are watching, 10 plus minutes of my longer videos.
Yeah.
So that says people want to know what I'm saying. Like, there is such a strong desire to understand or expel fears about what we do.
Yep.
And I have so many, like, when I say I get hundreds of emails a week, it's not an exaggeration.
Wow.
And I respond to every single email.
Good
So
for
that's
you.
a huge part of doing that job, I feel like, is response. I try to respond to every comment on my channel, which is hundreds.
Jeez.
And so I get a really big understanding of consumers in a huge general scope.
Right.
So my vantage point on our funeral industry is specifically unique, and no one else has that.
Yeah.
There's nobody else who has quite the scope that I do. And I see how many people don't have connections with the funeral directors they work with. They can't ask them questions. They feel like they can't ask them questions because they don't have a relationship with them. There's people who have carried questions 30, 40, 50 years in their life, and they've never had anybody to ask it to.
Man.
And they ask it. There's one woman, oh my God, it was so powerful. She said, my mother buried my dad 33 years ago. He has been gone forever. And she has been in unrest since because of this, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
We watched your video on whatever it was. She is at peace now because she has an answer to the question she didn't have anybody ask. And I'm like, holy crap,
I mean,
30
your heart,
some years
like,
that she has carried this.
Right.
But there's thousands of those people. And if you ask a funeral director, every single one will be like, I connected with that family, every family I connect with, and they can ask me anything. But do you give them permission? Like, when you make arrangements, do you say, if you have a question during this, please ask it. If you want anything changed with your loved one, there is time, and you have permission to do that.
I love that.
Because people don't think they can touch their loved one. People don't think they can change anything. People don't think there is time and opportunity. And after the fact, they are going to be talking about how you put the wrong shade of lipstick on their mom. And that will be the one defining thing about that funeral. It doesn't matter if you did 100 great things, but you got that wrong and you didn't give them permission to correct it.
Yeah.
When we all know that's simple to correct.
Right, exactly.
We all know that can be done in just minutes. But if that family didn't understand that could be done, I think we forget as funeral directors that families don't know this business. A lot of families are just encountering it for the first time, where maybe the generation that they dealt with, let's say their grandparents died and they were, buried, but they didn't partake in that because it was a grandparent. Now their parents are dying and it's a completely different, it's cremation or it's something
Yep.
else or whatever. And it's a completely different beast that they're dealing with essentially. And they don't
Sure.
have any perspective as to what that should look like for themselves. And they don't realize they could have a viewing followed by cremation, or they don't, I always say you don't know what you don't know. And these consumers don't know.
Yeah.
They have no concept, but because we've been doing this, we don't have a concept of unknowing.
It's like the
Does
tunnel
that make
vision.
sense?
No, that it definitely does.
It
And
is.
it's
It is.
such like a, oh my gosh, amazing thing for people to hear, and myself included. Just take a step back and say like, they don't know the ins and outs like we do. So give them
No.
permission to open up. Let them come in and actually feel comfortable with you, and then it's guaranteed success. Because if like a small mistake, like you were saying, like if the shade of rouge was wrong or whatever it is, they can
Right.
come in and be like, hey, do you mind just like touching this up? Is there anything you can do? And that way it's there's not a sour taste. And from a funeral director's point of view, their family wants to come back to you because they felt comfortable in that way. That's so
Right.
beautiful. That's so great. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed.
Well, and it's so simple. Like it's this simplicity of giving permission and
Yep.
like talking through. I do some continuing ed stuff with New York and New Jersey and did some with Wilbur, and
Hmm.
like just allowing families to know what visitation, like prepping them for visitation. Like people are going to say things that are hurtful, but they're not trying to hurt you. They love you and they're there, but nobody knows what to say during this.
Right.
And just like planting these little seeds with families, I think sometimes we become just order takers and we expect families to know what they want.
Yeah.
But how do they know what the options are if we have not provided information to them? Because putting down a price list that has 187 different things on it, broken down in 27 different ways, they look at it and go, well, we don't want a limo. Like, how many times do I show a family and they sit and they cross off everything they don't want, but they don't realize looking at things what it is they do want or what they
Right.
could be having, I guess.
And giving
And
them the
so,
options to do that.
yes, like direct cremation is not a disposition, it's a service choice. And we get really
Right.
confused, I think, as directors by that. And
Yeah.
families are confused by that because they think if they do cremation that there's only one path or there's only one thing and
Right.
they can't do anything beyond that. So
It's like,
there's
no, I
so
could
much to
lay out these choices for them that they can say, hey, we can commemorate them in a different way than we even thought was possible. And it's just such a good point because families will come in and you can say, we could still have an open casket viewing, and they would be blown away. They'd be like, oh, we would love to see them one last time. But they didn't realize, well, she really wanted cremation, so I guess that's the only thing we can do. No, it's
right.
just opening people's eyes. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, and how many families do you sit down by they come, like the person died at like 2 a.m. You sit down with them at like 11
Yeah.
a.m. and they go, so they've been cremated, right? And you're like, wow.
Well, no.
But that is what consumers believe. And we want to laugh and go, God, how stupid are they? How would they know
No,
different?
they wouldn't.
They assume if you say cremation, you are taking them back and throwing them in the retort.
Right.
That is truly what they believe,
Yeah.
that just by verbally saying, yep, go ahead, and they just don't know any different. And I
Yeah.
think we like to make fun of the ignorance of consumers
Hmm.
because we have not taken the time to educate them properly.
Sure.
And it's easier to make fun of the lack of knowledge that they have than to actually spend time filling them with knowledge, I guess, sometimes.
And that's
So
really what you
it's
do.
sad.
It's unbelievable, and I
Yes.
think it needs to continue
Yeah.
that way. And I think it's such a powerful thing for funeral directors to kind of hear and to actually act upon and do this with your families. It's a game changer.
Right.
There's no doubt.
Right. Well, it's like I think it's part of, we want that full circle when we're dealing with people. We want to go from at need to aftercare to pre-need back around. Like we want that full circle. And
Yep.
some of that is in that pre-need stage, just doing educational, gatherings like, hey, let's have coffee and donuts and let's talk about cremation and let people just ask questions about cremation. People want to know
Yes.
and they want the opportunity to ask. And yeah, it might be some of that, not graphic, but
Mm-hmm.
well, does that body really set up? Does
Right.
this happen? Does that happen? Do they really do this? Does this really? Because you hear all this stuff and they want to
Mm-hmm.
have their fears pressed away by our good information that we pour in them, and they just want an opportunity in a safe and comfortable environment to do that. So if Betty and Mary can come together and they can come ask questions about whatever it is they want to ask questions about, you're giving them that opportunity. So doing like the dinner conversations where you gather some people for dinner, or where you
Mm-hmm.
do a cremation luncheon, or you do things like that, those are so important. And they're things that as funeral homes you can, it's better advertising than a dang billboard, honestly,
It really is.
by connecting with people during that time, because then it's that community outreach that you're doing by then bringing them back in, because just because they're in your community doesn't mean they're calling your funeral home.
Yep.
It's not the way it is
And
anymore.
I yeah,
And you have to
that was the
put in.
traditional way for sure. For so
Right.
long, it's like, hey, we can just plop shop here and call it a day. Like we have a great location. Nope, that's just not the case anymore. You have to have the service that goes along with it.
You got to cultivate relationships, and you got to cultivate um, that consistency with people, and then you become their person
Yeah.
for the family and for all of those needs and for all of those things down the road. And then when they're helping people decide on a place, or when you know hospice nurses at the hospital, doctors, all these people have input on things. And if they get warm fuzzies and they get good um, feelings from different places, they're going to direct people to those. I know that's not legal or things they're supposed to be doing, but they have influence and they have input, and it happens. Churches,
Mm-hmm.
pastors, those people, they are going to do that. Have a pastor breakfast, bring in a speaker, educate pastors even about burial and cremation and what they can do with their community. Because I don't know if you guys are seeing this, where there's pastors who are directing their
Oh yeah.
community to for the congregation to do direct cremation and cut out the funeral home because you don't need them.
Yep. And they could say we could have a
Develop,
visitation here. It's so
right,
interesting that that's happening.
bigger relationships build more business.
Yep.
And I think we get grumpy about it. We get grumpy with the consumers, we get grumpy with the pastors, we get grumpy with the hospice workers because of our egos and oh, poor us. And
It's
it's
like,
like,
hey, look
no,
in, look in. What
like
can I
step
do?
back.
Yep.
Yeah, step back and flip the narrative. It can change, but we have to stop getting grumpy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. All right, I want to ask you one more question before I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
What is the question you get the most from all of your fans? Because I'm sure I know you get ones about decapitation, like constant. The
Oh my
pregnancy
God.
one, I know I always see you get that. What do you think is the number one that just kind of makes you chuckle? Because it's like I've gotten this question literally 1,000 times now.
Oh my gosh. So it's funny you asked this. So I'm developing two more continuing ed programs right now.
Okay.
And one of them is literally about consumer driven questions, because I do get such repetitive
And
questions.
you know it better than anyone.
I
Yeah.
to God, I'm trying to pull up my list right now to read a couple of them. I honestly, the one question I probably get the most on my live videos. So I try and do a couple times a month my
Mm-hmm.
coffee with Kari,
Yep.
and that when it's a live video on YouTube, it's not just your followers. You get whoever's on the computer and it pops up, and um people will just they just drop in the questions, and it's always the same questions. So
I'm sure.
a lot of them, let's see, exploding caskets, I get
Yeah.
asked about a lot.
Yeah. I've heard you talk
Um,
about it.
do you do I have to be embalmed? A big
Hmm.
misconception is that everybody is autopsied and everybody is embalmed.
Really?
People don't
Okay.
understand. They want to know how many body parts the embalmer takes out because they don't see a division between the medical examiner who autopsies and the
Yep.
funeral director who embalms. So it's defining roles. Just like the medical examiner and coroner, people don't understand the
The
difference.
difference.
Like
Yeah.
they misuse the terms like coffin and casket.
Yep.
They misuse the terms.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say the number one question I get, which has not ceased over the years,
Okay.
is how long does it take? Like my loved one died X number of years ago. What do they look like in the ground? Do they look the same?
Interesting.
And I think a lot of that is based on hoping that their loved one has not changed,
Yeah.
hoping that their child, a lot of the time it's a child,
Okay.
like my son died back in 1996.
Hmm.
Is he looking the same?
Right.
And so, and there is no answer.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of factors. What part of the country? Is it a flexing, climate?
Yeah.
Does it go from cold to hot?
Mm.
Is it a high water table? What kind of vault? What kind of casket? What kind of medication was the person on
Sure.
before they died? Because that affects embalming. I'm like, you could take two 40-year-old women, both having died of breast cancer. You could put them in the same casket, in the same vault, theoretically doing the same embalming in 2 years from now could look completely different
Yeah.
because of medication they were taking, all sorts of different things. So there is no answer. And people hate that.
Yeah.
But, and if anybody, I swear to Jesus, if a funeral director gives an answer to that, they're full of crap.
Yeah.
Because there is no way to answer that. So when people say, well, the funeral director told us that my loved one was going to be in perfect condition because they were preserved. Embalming is a temporary
Right.
preservation, temporary. As soon as that body gets into a moisture filled zone, which is what dirt is,
Yeah.
embalming or just decomposition exasperates
Yeah.
and goes fast again. Like, come on, people.
Yeah.
We don't need to sell crap just to, there's funeral directors who are going to do that, but these people are so misguided by
Yeah.
what funeral directors tell them. We can't stop it. It's going to happen. You
Hmm.
got people who are commission based and you got people who are whatever. I will never ever do that because it's like that. If we want clear education, we have to give clear, good answers.
Yes.
And we're just misrepresenting ourselves and misinforming the next generation of people by giving them crap. So
Yeah.
you can't answer that question, but it is the number one thing people always ask me.
That's so
And there's no
interesting.
answer. I can't even tell you how many videos. I've done 2-minute videos. I've done 5-minute videos. I've done long videos. I answer it in every coffee chat because people just want to know and there's no answer.
And then you
Yeah.
could just say, well, if Kari did the embalming, I could give you a better answer. But
There's
I'm
no
kidding.
way.
I'm
There's no
kidding.
way.
I'm kidding.
Because yeah, you got tissue gas, you got, oh my gosh, there's so many variables. That's
Oh yeah,
ridiculous.
it is. It
Ridiculous.
is, and it's good
Yeah.
that people can like at least be aware that it's going to be
Right.
different, and there's no way to possibly tell. And even
Yeah.
seeing disinterments, they vary unbelievably. So it's just
Oh my
there's
gosh.
nothing you can really do.
Yeah. Like, well, what about this one? Because they dug them up after 30 years and they looked great. Yeah. I said the factor here is we don't dig people up all the time. I don't
Right.
know if caskets are exploding all the time underground
Because it's underground.
because we're not digging them up to look. I'm like,
Exactly.
it's an unseen territory down there, guys. Like, nobody can know.
Right. And
Only if you did, like, if you buried 1,000 people and then disinterred them all after whatever, and then did maybe a bit of a study on that, but you would have so many variables based on age, condition of the body, cause of death, medication. Like medications to us, I think as embalmers is such the big factor right
it's
now. They
huge. It's
neutralize
everything.
embalming fluid.
Yep.
We've now got the vaccines, we've got all these other
And
factors that
then
are factoring in, which
the
nobody wants to talk about,
it's
but
true.
It is a factor.
And the
And
edema
so,
and jaundice, it's
oh
seems like
God,
it's getting out of control. Like it's constant, what you're having to deal
yep,
with and overcome, and it's just a whole nother
right,
factor that you're like, back in the day, I
right,
feel you could add your fluids. This is my combo. This is what I go with every time.
right,
Nope, you can't do
right.
that anymore. It's not the way. It's not the way.
Well, and I talk about how people are dead before they're dead, and people are like, Carrie, you talked about this before. Could you
Yes.
talk about it again? And I'm like, when I get Betty's dead a lot today is from this conversation. But I'm like, when I get Betty, and Betty died literally an hour ago, and she is fresh and warm, as we all use those terms. You
Yeah.
can't tell me you don't.
No, I do.
And she has a abdomen that is greener than some 5-day old decomps.
Mm-hmm.
She has been dying inside for days. And it's
Absolutely.
because we between medications and things that happen,
And pumping with
bodies are being
fluids and everything. Yep.
going and things
Mm-hmm.
where parts of them have died. They're getting necrotic, they're rotting, they're bad. And we cannot, well, mom died and you had her within an hour. Why is she so, it's because she was dead long before she was dead. Like
Right.
it's a reality. And I think that has become more and more. And like you said, edema, when they're being kept on respirators
Mm-hmm.
or ventilators, or this longevity of hospital stays that we're seeing more now.
Yep.
We're getting all that edema and medication pumping and things that are happening at hospitals just out of, necessity or whatever.
Right.
And that just factors in
And
a
just to hold
lot.
on for like a couple extra days is really probably what it
Right.
comes down to, and then it changes everything on our end. So you have to be aware of that, recognize it, and say, okay, that's not going to change for better or for worse for us. So it's like, what are we going to do to counteract that and make sure that we do our best job possible?
Right. Sarah's flying in from California and she can't come until it's,
For
going to
three
work with
weeks.
her schedule and her thing. So can you just hold that body for 6 weeks and then we're going to have a viewing? And I don't understand why you can't have a viewing. And like, are you seeing that more and more?
Yeah, it's especially since COVID started, it's gotten way out of control because people are like, "Oh, well, someone passed away and someone in our family has COVID. We want to make sure that they see him, so we have to wait at least 2 3 weeks." And now it's kind of become normal place where it's like, "Oh, we did this with so and so, or I knew my family member, so and so, blah blah blah. They
Yeah.
held on to you for 4 weeks because of this and that." So it's definitely on the rise. So it's craziness. It's crazy.
It's like, well, dad's face is now peeling off because he is decomposed so badly, and we can't get any cosmetic to stick
Oh
because it's
man.
all stuffed off. Well, I don't understand. You embalmed, right? Ooh.
Yep, yep. Oh my gosh, it's too good. All right, well,
Yeah.
Carrie, thank you
Oh,
so much. Thank you
thank you.
so much for coming on. You're the absolute
Of
best.
course.
We appreciate everything you
Thank
do,
you.
and keep doing what you're doing and bringing all this joy and love to our industry. You are just the best. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll have to come see you in Chicago
Yes,
sometime.
I love it. Highly encouraged. All right, well, you have a great day. Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thanks. Bye, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you.